Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, I wanted to start this video by showing you the snow depth we had at midnight on the 25th, and we can look across the country here and see, basically places that did get the white Christmas and those places that didn't. And why I start off with this is because we need to be watching this corridor very carefully in the coming days because the snow depth across that area is about to change quite a bit. Now, the setup, the precursor, the thing that's getting this going is right here. These were maximum temperatures on the 25th, and we can see a pretty stark divide across the country. First of all, where the snowpack was still in place and where we were getting some light snow yesterday, we saw that our temperatures struggled to really get, anywhere close to freezing inside that circle. Where the deeper trough is out west, of course, we saw some below average temperatures as well. But where the trough lifted into this larger ridge, warmth really spread pretty far to the north. In fact, we saw temperatures getting up into the 50s and 60s in the central and eastern Corn Belt and down across the south as we had been forecasting for quite some time. Very, very warm conditions. Now, I want to talk about this because in wintertime, when we get these big warm-ups, I want you to understand that they are often really good indicators of where the atmosphere is loading itself up with a lot of water vapor. And as those temperatures skyrocket, take a look at this. This is an animation that shows you just over the last 24 hours, locations that were approaching or setting record high temperatures. You saw it kind of blast there right in the midsection of the country. Well, that same area, here it is again, was loading itself up with precipitation, precipitable water, I should say. Now, when we study atmospheric sciences, one of the very first things that we teach our students is this relationship. It's the relationship between temperature and water vapor pressure. Now, what is that? This basically says that as you increase temperature, you exponentially increase the atmosphere's ability to contain water. Now, what am I talking about? Well, if you were to go from 0 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, that's going from 32 Fahrenheit to 50 Fahrenheit, you double the atmosphere's ability to contain water vapor. And then that relationship continues to grow the warmer it gets. So my point here is that any time in winter where we get these really, really warm above average temperatures, we are tapping into a vast reservoir of water vapor coming off the Gulf of Mexico, and it's going to move north. And so here it is. This is the beginning of your rapid recap, okay? By this evening, on the 26th, we can see that our dew point temperatures are already building in this corridor well above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And that is telling me that we're going to load this area up for bringing in a lot of precipitation in the coming days. And on the back side of it, where it's still cold, we're going to be seeing quite a bit of snow. So here it is. This is your next 5 days of total accumulated precipitation from the European model. And yes, we will still do a multi-model analysis on this. But you can see almost the trajectory of the precipitation. And we know that with the deeper trough sitting here that's finally ejecting into the central part of the United States, we're going to watch one big low pressure system to finish out 2019, and then a second one's going to target down here beyond this time period. So we are in for a very active time period in the midsection of the United States. And as I said at the beginning, that does include the addition of some snow. So European model over here on the right, GFS over here on the left. These are the ensemble model forecasts for the probability of getting 6 inches or more snowfall just through Monday evening. All right. So this is just through the next 5 days. You can see how both models are targeting the same area here as having the potential for picking up quite a bit of snow. Again, we'll do a multi-model analysis in just a few moments. But to continue with your rapid recap, let's now go to the 7 days starting on Monday going through next Saturday night. So, this Sunday going through next Saturday night. And what we notice is that while the West Coast tends to back off a little bit, a stronger subtropical jet stream combined with an active polar jet, they're going to come together and they're going to paint this corridor very active. You can see both the European and the GFS showing up in the same locations as a very, very active day 4 through day 7 time period in the forecast. Now, will we be able to unlock some, really cold Arctic air? Well, over the next 5 days, we do have good multi-model agreement here that we're going to be able to keep things on the warmer side as the troughs that sweep through the west do lift. They pull north. And as a consequence, it's going to be hard to let this colder air that's building up here, not only over the next 5 days, but over the next 10 days in parts of Alaska and the Arctic from really diving down. But it appears that after maybe the 5th, 6th, or 7th of the month, month, where we're going to be able to pull some of that colder air at times into the eastern half of North America. Now, this is yet to be a really substantial cold air outbreak, but we do have some cold air that we can tap into here that maybe as we get to the middle and end of this month, we could really use. So that's the end of your rapid recap. Let's get into some of the details here. These are the two main troughs we're watching. Number 1 is here. Number 2 is there. This is the trough that came through parts of Southern California last night, bringing in some very heavy rainfall. And look at the ridge spreading out ahead of it. That is the warmth that we're still getting here in the eastern half of the country. But our best upper level support sits right here between the trough and ridge. And this is system number 1 that's happening over here. And number 2 is right over here. Let's talk about how they're moving through the country. Now, first things first, last night, as that first trough swept through parts of Southern California, we actually had down near San Diego a tornado warning. So great upper level kinematics that we're talking here about the wind, its change in speed and direction with height, gave us some storms that rotated. And we did still have some light snow that was moving through parts of North Dakota and Minnesota from the system that did squeeze through there on Christmas Day. But again, let's come back to our forecast here. Over the next 5 days, this is what we're looking at in terms of total accumulated precipitation. But if you're north of that dashed line, all of this will be falling as snow and potentially quite a bit. Now, just to the south of it, we got a few different things to be worrying about. For example, on Saturday, Storm Prediction Center is already identifying a large area for the risk of thunderstorms. That would be inside of this circle. But we need to be watching right down here as well for the potential for some of these storms to become severe and also have the potential for putting down some very, very heavy rainfall amounts. So again, this is in the day on Saturday. Now, as that system emerges, we are also going to watch this corridor first, and then secondly here for the potential for ice. So this is the probability of getting at least 1/10 of an inch of ice or greater. And you can see that through parts of Nebraska, South Dakota, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, we're talking about the possibility here of getting 1/10 of an inch of ice better than 50%, and in some locations higher than that. So that's the second threat with this system. The third is going to be snow. I'm now going to show you operational models here. So remember, when we look at these, we need to just be paying most attention to the snow swath where the heavy snow is going to be. The amounts will be refined with time. But looking out to Monday evening, the European model has a broad region in here who has the potential for picking up, well over 6 inches of snowfall. And the model right now, just given how much moisture is still pulled out of the Gulf of Mexico, is going quite high with the amounts. Is this a possibility? Yes. Is it likely that we cover that huge swath of area with 9, 10, 11 inches of snow? It exists, but we need to make sure that we don't blow this out of proportion. You can see that the heavier snow does come all the way back to the foothills and the Front Range here into the Rocky Mountains. But remember, this system is lifting north, which means this is going to get very heavy precipitation here. And with that, the transport of that moisture back around the backside of this could potentially produce some high snowfall amounts. Again, multi-model analysis. This is the European. This is the GFS. You do see that both models are picking up on the potential for quite a bit of snowfall. But again, it's going to be a situation where the day of the event is where we're going to be able to pinpoint down where those heaviest snow bands are going to be. That's always so tricky with forecasting snow. So here we go. Let's watch it. First thing we're going to watch here, and I let this go back to late last evening. We're going to watch system number 1 here and system number 2 emerge down here as we let this thing play through, our high resolution NAM play through the next couple of days here. So 7 a.m. on Thursday morning, still some light snow spreading through parts of North Dakota and Minnesota. Light freezing rain through parts of the UP. But here's our next system squeezing through, and let's watch how this one kind of emerges here and starts to push through the Four Corner states. So notice midsection of the country, it appears that high pressure is moving in, but look at the advection of the moisture. See it just pulling out of the Gulf? And remember, out ahead of it is where we had our greatest threat. We were most concerned here about the icing threat right into here. So this is valid 10 p.m. on Friday. And as we let this plan out, so that was basically the day on Friday right here, getting into early Saturday morning. You can see the widespread threat of some freezing rain in through here with the snow already cranked up on the backside. So this stretches all the way from parts of Colorado through Nebraska into South Dakota and then eventually up into North Dakota and Minnesota. From here, we're going to have to let another model take over. But already notice right through this area is where the main frontal boundary will be, and that's why we're expecting right down here in parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, getting over toward Kentucky, Tennessee. That's our area we're watching for the strong to severe storms. Now my next maps are going to be side by side, and on the left I have the GFS, and on the right I have the European. Now as we play this one out, we've already seen to about this point, okay? So this we saw with our high resolution models. Now you know I did this multi-model analysis in the last video, and I said, wow, the GFS, which is over here on the left, cranked the system and threw it very quickly here up into Canada, and the European was much slower. And I said I favored the European. What I should have favored was a model blend. Now, there was no way of knowing that at the time, but it turns out the European sped up and caught up with the GFS, but the GFS also backed up and slowed down. So together, this is noon on Saturday. And we can already see the heavy rain spreading here, the snow on the backside, and both models in very good agreement on the position and strength of this low. Let's now get ourselves out to basically Sunday afternoon. You can see that the low pressure center is sitting somewhere in Iowa and Minnesota in both models. And we saw in the overnight hours the strong storms moving through the lower Mississippi River Valley. They're now spreading very heavy rain through parts of the Mid-South, getting up into the Ohio River Valley. On the back side, look at the potential for snow throughout the day on Sunday. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do see the National Weather Service issuing not only winter storm warnings out for this, but looking at how tight the pressure gradient is, I think we do need to be on the lookout for blizzard conditions in this area. So watch this very carefully with me. Both models are picking up on it. Now, of course, as they normally do, after we get this system out, so this is now valid Monday afternoon, still the European slower, bringing more widespread snow to the back side of this with the GFS quicker. They both agree on very windy conditions, all right? But look at what happens as you get you out past Monday into next week. So the European with the slower solution keeps the system around longer. In fact, it tries to make things quite interesting in the northeast as well. You can see some of the snow there with a little secondary low that forms just off the coast of Maine. Now look over here at the model differences between the GFS on the left and the European on the right. The GFS not showing what the European is here in the northwest. See that? Look at how much wetter it is here in the northwest from the European model. And as we play forward, the biggest difference is the GFS puts a big area of high pressure here. The European already has that high pressure center sliding off to the east coast, which means, well, open the Gulf right back up and watch what the European does. Brings in over there on the right. Look at all the moisture it brings into the cotton belt here as we get out basically a week from now to the first full day of the new year. And there it is, just pulls that moisture in. When does the GFS do it? Well, turn your attention back over to the left. It's later. It brings it in another day later. But both of them bring a system in to start off our new year here. And the GFS keeping it farther to the south, that's on the left. The European pulling it farther to the north, that's on the right. And you can see that we're going to stay on this active pattern as we begin 2020. Now, I'm not going to show you much beyond day 10, of course, with our operational models, but you've now seen those two waves I mentioned earlier when we're looking at the flow of the atmosphere. These are the two systems they're producing. So looking now at December 31st through January the 4th. Remember, the European pulling it out sooner. Therefore, we're getting much heavier rainfall that stretches from eastern Texas all the way through the Ohio River Valley, clear down to the panhandles of Florida. The GFS bringing that same system in later. You can see the differences here, spreading the precipitation later in the time period, keeping it farther to the south. The European wants to put this down as snow as well. So we have a lot to be watching as we begin 2020. Now, what about these temperatures? Well, great upper level support by the time we get into Sunday morning for that first system. In fact, to see this trough here sweeping through, switching its tilt, lifting all of that moisture out ahead of it, that is an excellent case study of synoptic upper level divergence just plowing through the midsection of the country. But behind it, by the time we get out to next Thursday, here's our next wave. As it moves in, this is the one that keeps things very wet down here as we get into 2020. But you notice that all the cold air is still tucked up here, and we don't yet have these troughs connected. That's why we don't get really bitterly cold air penetrating into the midsection of the country with any of these systems. And here it is. Look, this is January 5th. Well, really, this is Saturday, January 4th in the evening. And what have we done? We've gone back to just leaving the cold air here, and we're not pulling any really deep troughs into the United States. So even though this trough sweeps in here, we don't really bring that bitterly cold air by the time we get out to the 5th, 6th, and 7th deep into the southeast. It comes in cold, but it's not going to be Arctic cold at this point. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell you. But honestly, here it is. This is the evening of the 6th. This was Tuesday the 6th. This might be the first time we actually get a blast of really cold air, not Arctic, but cold air coming out of the cold air that we're storing right now over Alaska. But when it all finishes, I get out here to January 10th, I notice this. The deepest trough is still sitting over the North Pole. And as it's sitting there, that tells me some stuff that's going on with the polar vortex. That tells me the behavior of the North Pacific and the North Atlantic. And this is a situation where we're just not breaking down the polar vortex. We're not weakening this circulation enough to let cold air really just spill south into these areas anytime soon. So we're going to have to wait until we get beyond the first full week of the new year, I think, before we see any sort of sustained cold. And it's going to be hard to come by for the near term. That's reflected right here. Positive Arctic Oscillation Index, that's still on the table, getting us all the way out to probably the 8th, 9th, and 10th. And what's interesting is the rest of the atmosphere is really trying to behave like El Nino. For example, the Southern Oscillation Index, it's crashing hard temporarily. You've got a really strong subtropical jet keeping the southeast very wet. We don't have much cold air across the lower 48. Those are all very typical El Nino-like base states in the atmosphere. But we don't have really, really warm water in the central and eastern Pacific at this point. So we have to look at our other drivers, MJO, and what's going on with the Indian Ocean Dipole. The Indian Ocean Dipole's, I wrote up here, thrashing around. It's kind of giving us one last little hurrah, I think. And it's kind of messing with the MJO, which emerged into phase 6, which is definitely a warm phase for North America. But it's supposed to curl back over into phase 7, 8, and 1, 2. But instead of doing this, it crashed right back down into null phase. Now, this is what's interesting. It is currently forecast to emerge over here in phase 3, 4, 5. And what have I been saying about phase 3, 4, and 5? Well, those are phases that for South America tend to be dry. Now, let me show what I mean there. Over the next 15 days, take a look at this graphic. A couple of big changes. One, it's going to rain in parts of Australia and Indonesia. Two, you can see the flow of the jet stream doing this. Subtropical branch, polar branch. But let's now zoom in here on South America and talk about this versus these two regions. And we'll finish up here. Over the last 30 days, I want you to see this. While we are building up deficit and rainfall here, the bigger deficit I want to talk about is actually right down here in Rio Grande do Sul. So it's been wet in this corridor, as you can see here, especially as you get over into Paraguay, Mato Grosso do Sul, and also into Paraná down here. And we have yet to really see the major impacts of the fact that it has been drier than normal in Mato Grosso. The bigger impacts have been a little bit here farther to the east. But I want you to focus in on this area here because some recent reports have shown that the full season corn that's been planted there has gone through some really, really dry conditions. And over the next 15 days, that same area, so again, Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul, those two areas showing up very dry, as is Paraguay. Meanwhile, wet in Brazil's eastern growing area and also in much of Mato Grosso, which is right in through here. And as you can see, it's only northern Argentina that's showing up dry in the next 15 days, with near Cordoba, Santa Fe, that particular region, we're seeing wetter conditions. Now, as we fast forward, and this will be the last thing I want to show you in this video, the new European weeklies came out just the day before Christmas, and they were talking about the month of January showing me a bit of a pattern change. We see wetter conditions here, but the dryness in here is something we're going to have to watch because it may be, well, the models may end up pulling this drier weather back down into this area and following that curve as we move through the month of February. Now, if it stays wet in here in February, this is going to be very difficult to harvest the first crop of soybeans. So we need to watch this area very carefully for harvest troubles in February with first crop beans. But I'm starting to get very concerned about the drought pressures we're seeing in Brazil's southern growing regions. So we'll all keep an eye on it together, keep you updated. Hope you all had a great week so far. As 2020 begins, things are getting active, so let's prepare for it, all right? Have a great week. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.